Thank you, thank you. Actually, we're not so far from Sempak because I live in northern Italy, so just 2 hours and a half, I think, by car from you. And I mostly work here in northern Italy. Currently, I'm a researcher at the National Research Council from some year. And so I want to tell you something about what we are doing here in Italy with the nice on Africa, of course, and telling a bit more in detail the story of our mission to Senegal of the past year on the biggest Lesser Kestrel roost worldwide, at least among those known. So I think let's go into the. So I changed the title 2 or 3 times, but everything is in more or less, and I try to translate also to French for somebody who prefer to read in English language. Okay, so the story starts from southern Italy. We then move briefly to northern Italy. We then eyes to these other 2 places where we work with herons, and then we will go towards Africa following the migration of these wonderful birds. I will not enter in details on the migration, but more stressing on Africa, but of course open on question and interest. So we start in Matera because Matera is the city of Lesser Kestrel, known worldwide. So any bird enthusiast should go there in some moment in his life. And it's a place where we work from some years. And it's a very special city because mostly constituted by rock on this side. On the other, there is the modern city. Currently, Lesser Kestrel prefer the modern city. Actually, this is something more recent. But why we are there? Because it's very easy to study birds there. So we put almost 200 nest boxes on the roofs of Matera. So I'm talking of we because these 2 guys are those leading this study from 2016, and most of the works I show you today comes from this informal group of researchers called movecolab, and we decided to give us this name. We are among different institutions. So some boring stuff. So climate change. Climate change is affecting even warm adapted species. So some years ago, we studied the climate niche of Lesser Kestrel in Italy, and we found that over a short, mid to short term still, they may face 2 problems due to excessive heat. So we identify that those populations of Lesser Kestrel that currently breeds at the northern edge of their distribution may be pivotal in the years to come for the conservation of these species at a worldwide scale. Our expectations have been tragically confirmed in these last studies we published a few months ago, where we found that the Lesser Kestrel are simply starving for excessive heat. So it is too hot even for Mediterranean species. In 2023, over 60% of the chicks of Lesser Kestrel in Matera died for excessive heat. So it's something really impressive what is going on there. So due to climate change, we are moving. So the birds are moving, and us with them from southern to northern latitudes. So we are in the coplain where we obtained this big financed project for conservation of Lesser Kestrel, not only in northern Italy, but also in those areas of Greece, northern Greece, where the birds are breeding there, facing more or less to the same problem. So the Greek part is led by Nikos Tsiopoulos, who is not here today, and I will not speak about Greece, but is also something interesting. So very briefly, what is LIFE FALKON? A big project in which we will install hundreds of nest boxes up there where the Lesser Kestrel are just arrived, and they are in troubles due to climate change and global land use change specifically. I invite all of you to look at the documentary that we recorded the past year on LIFE FALKON. It is free on YouTube with subtitles in several languages. So have a look at it. It's 15 minutes, so it's nice, at least from me, but also let's see what you think on it. So we are now in the Po Plain. What is Po Plain? Is the vastest plain of Western Europe. and one of the most densely urbanized area of the world. Very few places in the world are with more people, which is the main aspect of the propane, is these ones. So crops, crops, and crops, almost uninterruptedly, and birds have to survive there. So Lesser Kestrel use this central part of propane as a surrogate of steppe land, and they can more or less survive there. That's what we're studying on. One of the curious things of this place is that Lesser Kestrel, instead of living in cities, as in Matera or in the most of Spain, for example, they use these old abandoned farm building. The problem with this building is that they are falling down year by year, and LIFE FALKON is among its main aim as to replace these buildings with safe places where to breathe. And we are doing something in this sense. So this photo is for this year, and it's earth-breaking for us because we could save at least some of the players of this big colony. But we are researchers, so we are using conservation money to do research as well. And we did some more fine climatic model for propane. And basically, we like to mount GPS, but we also try to take data from that. So we started in 2019 with this PathTrack GPS. I put some details on the kind of devices because I know most of you do the same. So maybe you're interested in know what exactly we mount on the birds and what we want to achieve with this. First of all, we focused on foraging strategies and habitat selection. So we were interested in understand how birds can thrive in such an intensive cultivated area. And we found something. We found that they prefer low vegetation and crop far from waters, and especially harvested and alfalfa crops. This may appear trivial, but it is not. And actually, we could demonstrate that this kind of habitat selection is the same that favor other important birds that are disappearing from all over Europe, basically. So Lesser Kestrel is a good umbrella species. And to be more simple, Lesser Kestrel thrive where this kind of cheese is produced, because the industrial line that produce the milks, the special kind of milk that is needed for Parmigiano, are also to shape the landscape in a favorable way for birds, which is something very important. And we are now working along with the consortium of Parmigiano for this. But not all the poplane is cultivated for cheese. And you have to know that half of the plain is full of water. Actually, they cultivate rice mostly. So to be simple, rice is for herons and cheese is for kestrel. That's the point. How many herons are there? Many, many, many herons. Not so many as some years ago, but we counted at least 420 heronries in this part of the Pau Plain. And we are counting these birds uninterruptedly from 1972. So we have a huge data set in this sense. It is also open for colleagues. As you see, we have published it completely open for future works. This is the aspect of that part of the plain, completely different from those where the Lesser Kestrel thrive. So this is really floating land because uninterruptedly rice fields shape the landscape. And here and there, where some patch of wood remain, there are herons, there are heronries. So these huge colonies of herons, something that in Europe to see so many birds all together is rare and difficult, actually. So what is a heronry? Is a colony, mixed colony. Up to 7 species can breed together in these places. These are drawn photo in which you can see little egret and cattle egret and purple heron. So the drone goes down and down, then the female purple heron protects her eggs from the drone with the wings. and then we go back. We didn't want to make the birds to fly away. What's going on there? So EU regulation, the Common Agricultural Policies, is financing forms of rice cultivation which save water, which is very good. Of course, water is an important resource, but it's very bad for herons and animals because this entire region, from hundreds of years. So we know that the rice cultivation here began around the 15th century. Now, so lands that were covered with water for hundreds of years now have these aspects, so completely dry or even covered with plastic. And both the dry and the plastic kind of rice cultivation are supported by common agricultural policies. And this is a trouble for herons. We found that birds' population are declining because of this change in the flooding extension of rice. So we decided to go for herons. We searched the nest. This video serves to demonstrate that birds are dinosaurs, for those that have any doubt about it. Really interesting. It's also interesting that in the same nest you have chicks 10, 12 days old and eggs still to clutch. So these eggs later on hatched, sorry. And how we studied these herons. So we had a sort of grant from Global Bark because the Milvus group had GPS in excess, so they passed them to us. So thank you again, Letta, Martin, and Urs for this, because this really allowed for us to make a turn in the study. But we also buy several others, Ornitella and Technosmart devices from 2018 now. So we set up a way for capturing the heron, which is now very, very effective, even if with some trouble, let's say. And so again, as for Lesser Kestrel, we start to study the foraging activities of these birds. We are now writing the first papers after some years. And one of the work will want to explore the multi-species foraging habitat selection, because there were some old tracking data also for little egret and night herons. And for example, focusing on the use of the rice fields that these different birds do. But I mean, many data are available still for that. And focusing on purple heron, we want now to compare the habitat selection in these different parts, because after the project started in Poplay, and after the first promising results, we could convince colleagues from Spain and Eastern Europe, specifically Danube Delta. So we went there with the Danube Delta Research Institute, Alexandru Dorozenko specifically. And so we deployed birds from these other localities. And now with the University of Valencia, we want to start a research project on habitat selection using the data already available. So very few slides on migration, and then we fall into Africa. What we found on purple heron migration, at least I want to mention you two things. It's very interesting, the night-day balance of migration. So they tend to cross the barrier during night. This was something completely unknown until the moment. And even more exciting, we found that these birds, especially over Sahara, climbs up to 6,000 meters to cross the Sahara, probably because of some exigence to reduce thermal stress. So they suffer heat currently with other bird systems. The tracks are not so many as in the previous slide because we don't have altitude information for all the tracked birds. And Davide Scrideller is working now on these data, and the draft will be ready soon, I hope. So while we are much more advanced on the study of Lesser Kestrel, we are now also, thanks to LIFE FALKON, but thanks to the many other projects and people working on this species from years, we are now working like a huge, big group on this species. We collated together all the GPS tracks collected till the moment. It's impressive because I think it's one of the biggest databases for any bird species, or at least among raptors. So this is the complete database. Giacomo Assandri is mainly working on this data. He's exploring, for example, the effect of wind farm into Europe. And again, many other things can be done here. But coming to the core theme for today, so let's go into Africa. So first of all, I have to stress that something not completely wonderful is happening there, because some of our herons were poached during migration, but not only in Africa. So we have one of the birds who was killed by a hunter here in northern Italy. And so this is a problem that we know is well problematic for passerines, but even big birds can be victim for poaching in not only in Africa at least, but also there. So one of the interesting things we found is that many of our birds, ours from Valencia to Danube Delta, are all heading towards the Djoud National Park in the border between Senegal and Mauritania. I really want to be there. Still, I couldn't go, but it should be really something impressive, because you see that all the birds are heading in this area, which is really pivotal for conservation of European birds, more than expected, I think. So this is just a photo I picked from the web for this national park. And let's see, in the future, to do something directly there. I don't have many other things to add here. So back to the Lesser Kestrel, we have this student, Samuele, who is a brilliant researcher. He's about to start his PhD, but he already did very interesting research works. And one of these is about the movement of the Lesser Kestrel in the Sahel. So what's the question you want to answer? Maybe mostly these. So how the seasonality in the Sahel vegetation triggers the movement of Lesser Kestrel. And again, so this is all the people that offer data for this work, which is still under preparation. So we have all these data, and I'm not entering in the detail of the analysis that Samuele did, just showing you that focusing on non-breeding ranges, always accounting for populations of origins, and accounting for sex differences. So he overlapped an habitat use map below the locations, and differentiated between early and late Sahel period, finding a clear difference in habitat use basically towards croplands, which are used more in the late Sahelian period. This is probably the main pattern. And so to resume three of the main findings, but I'm not talking about those in the sex now here. So changes in habitat use across the season, population and sex-specific environmental condition, and population and sex-specific individual responses. Actually, female apparently move northward earlier than the males in the Sahel, and there are several potential explications of this, but anyway, I'm not entering into detail. So let's go to Senegal. So in November 2022, thanks to a project led by Javier Bustamante of the Doñana Biological Station, and thanks to the collaboration we are doing on Lesser Kestrel now, we went to this rooster, famous rooster of Lesser Kestrel in the southeastern Senegal. Where is located exactly? This is called Kusmar Island within the Saloum River. Saloum means salted. So we are far from the sea, but the the river is still salted and full of birds also for this reason. You have gall-billed tern, many herons, so many other European birds wintering there. The Kuzma Island roost may appear so huge that everybody knows it, but this is not the case. Actually, the French researcher literally discovered the place for European researcher. Local people always know this. Only in 2007, so they start a series of campaign down there to understand the dynamics and the size of the roost. It is very difficult to count so many birds in such a condition. So they went there in up to 10 people, as you can read in this very, very interesting paper. And we were fascinated by this photo, for example, and by the fact that they observed the birds from at least three nationalities. So one Italian bird with a Sicilian ring, one French bird, and three Spanish rings. So the idea, while Pilar and colleagues focused on the roost itself, so they went there for some years, counting the roost and describing the dynamics along the winter, because the roost is changing size very consistently during the winter. Our idea was simply to go there, profiting of the fact that many birds can be catch, and to study them directly and to track birds from winter to spring instead from spring to winter, as we were used to do in Europe. And once you go there, you see scenes like these. I know most of you are already seeing these are not Lesser Kestrel, and these are not, of course, Lesser Kestrel. Very good bird, as you are. These are huge baobabs that dominate the island, in which are used as roost by these magnificent birds. So only for these 10 minutes deserve the trip to the roost. And so just some photo to enjoy this wonderful situation. Which bird is this? This is the scissor-tailed kite, Melagnon nuclear, French, sorry for my pronouns, Calictinia ryokuri. So it's a very poorly studied bird. All what I could find is this location in eBird, but of course these are occurrence records. As you can see, there are many from Kenya because many British birders go there. Simply, we don't know very little about this bird, but these 40,000 Elanion cannot breed in Kuzmar. So somewhere they have to go and somewhere they have to come from. So it would be very interesting to study them in the years to come. If somebody has any more news or know something more about this bird, I would be pleased to talk about it in some moment. So I repeat here my email to this reason. But we were there for Lesser Kestrel. So what's going on in November? Only a few thousand of Lesser Kestrel use the roost in this period, and they are very shy because they leave the roost when still dark, and they arrive in the very last moment of the day when almost dark. So it's strange because we arrived there convinced to see this enormous murmuration of kestrels, but was not so easy to see actually. And anyway, we had to pass through African bureaucracy. I know in Switzerland you're not so used to bureaucracy. In Italy we are, but so I was feeling perfectly at home in this sense. Nothing strange for us. So we had to went firstly in Dakar and then in Kaolack, which is the most important city near to Kuzmar, and we stay hours and hours in offices. And then we also arrived to the wonderful hotel. It is not properly Africa. It is in something like White Africa, but it's very nice enclave, of course. It was my first time in Africa, and I spent hours just looking around into the hotel. It was really interesting. And then perspective, there were herons also, so I was happy. Then we rent a four car, and we went to Ndiafat, which is so this is the main road arriving there. Then arriving in Ndiafat, you say okay, let's try to speak with somebody that may bring us to the island in some way, and then you have to wait. So this is Africa. Staying there, but we profited the time, so we start to talk with the local people with our ugly French, but somehow we can communicate. And one of the important things there is that these people, this village, is really they're the only one that can access the island, and they are the guardian of the island. So it's very important to transmit to them that they can preserve this area for, I don't know, touristic or any purpose, but to preserve the falcon instead of hunting them or doing anything else. And I think this is something they already had in mind, because French team in the past years did a great job in this sense. There are very few bird tourists that go there, and people appear happy with this. Then they also imagine to develop the island. I don't know in which kind of way. I don't think it would be possible or neither sustainable. But anyway, this is nice. It is at least nice that they look into a sort of, what to say, sustainable development of the place. So they really like the postcard with the Lesser Kestrel. And we stay hours in the village, very nice. Then we start the observation, also because the first day they say, il y a pas de bateau. So there is no boat. So we arrive there, all organized from Europe, all equipment, etc. And they say, oh, there is no boat, so you can't go, simply. Maybe tomorrow, maybe the day after tomorrow. So we had to wait 2 days. Finally, we could find a boat, a very safe boat, as you can see. And then you have to walk a lot, as in North Africa. So you have to cross the river, partly by boat and partly walking into the water. And once there, we settled up a camp, and we start to observe, because the first problem was to find the exact point of the roosts, which was not obvious. The island is huge. There are many birds, but entering there is not so obvious. At least the essential element was the coop, so the machete. Of course, everybody has the machete. And nothing. We spent a lot of time there observing, then entering into the core of the island. Of course, we were equipped very heavily, while our local guides were in simple flick-flocks, and nothing else was needed. And we found after a while that the baobab were the true roast. So you can see it clearly, because they are all with feces on, and under the roosts you have many pellets and mole feathers. So we had clear idea that Lesser Kestrel were there, and we collected also these, of course. So these are data and data. So then we set up the first nets, and we start again to wait. This is the keywords for African time, of course. And the local guide also cooked for us. We arrived there with the trekking equipment, so prepared the soup, etc. They say, no, please, real food need, and so they cook for us. And the first night we got a lot of fruit bats, which was also cool experience for us ringers for the first, because it takes almost 20 minutes for every animals to take off from the bird net. So the first we were all excited. At the 10th of this we were annoyed by bats, almost because we were not prepared. We were not vaccinated against rabies and other things that bats can transmit, of course. On the island, there is a residual population of hyena, because they're not hunting there. So the island is all forêt classée, so it's a protected forest. And we couldn't see them, but we struggled. So we set up camera traps to observe the hyena. We couldn't find them. We found a lot of African wolves, so the jackals, basically, which are also very shy with humans, but we're more convinced here to be pass by. Also by night, they were just outside our tents. And then the last day, we finally set up, we understand that the problem was the height of the net. And so we set up this, you can see it's not very proper, but anyway, it was a tall net at least. And finally, we could catch the birds. This is not very comfortable to ring in this condition, but we could arrange it. So here we are mounting the GPS. We were observing the molt. Something very interesting about Lesser Kestrel is that they are widely studied, but very little is known about the molt pattern during winter, because until the moment it was only deduced by molt feathers in the roosts, except with some capture in South Africa, I must admit. So this is one of our target. And then we also captured a lot of kites and nothing for the moment. In 2022, we were not allowed to ring them, so we just take some photos and some measurements. But in the future, we want to study it. So here Javier is checking the mold pattern. And we mounted these Interrex GPS GSM for the first time on Lesser Kestrel, which worked very well, very properly. And what's going on with this data? So we had a lot of data from there, really, literally tens of thousands. One of the things could be to, again, here, as in Europe, to study habitat use and habitat selection down here. And one of the things is, of course, that birds goes for orthopteran there. And is something we still didn't explore. So is all in progress. And these are the data from spring migration. It's nice because the birds disperse not only in Europe, but also in Africa. So these were the first bird breeding in Morocco ever tracked, basically. And some of the juveniles went up without breeding. This is also expected, but very interesting data and very original. And so the expedition 2022 conclude with these first results, but in this moment, today, they are still in Senegal and not there, unfortunately, but they are in Passy now, patrolling the foraging area of Lesser Kestrel, along with Ines Capri, other top researcher in Lesser Kestrel, and we are organizing for the 2024 expedition, hopefully. So to conclude, I want to tell you that the Senegal deployed birds can be followed with an animal tracker, along with these other juveniles of Lesser Kestrel that we tracked in northern Italy, which is the application. I'm sure all of you know Animal Tracker. So if you want to search, there are currently some of our Italian birds patrolling Mali, and the Senegal birds that deployed the past week can be and will be soon followed there. So to conclude, final game, find the nightjar. I will let you some seconds to do it. Okay, let's see. This was how many of you that found? This is how we stand during the night, because they are very loud out of the tent. So we stay around the island, also looking for these wonderful birds. So thank you. Finally, I was shorter than expected.
Donc, je vais faire un résumé rapide en français de la présentation. Donc, Michelangelo Morganti est chercheur au Conseil national de la recherche en Italie et il coordonne notamment le projet Falcon. Et donc, ce projet a commencé notamment, donc il s'intéresse au faucon cresrelette, qui est une espèce de petits faucons donc, qui se reproduit en Europe, autour du bassin méditerranéen, et qui migre l'hiver en Afrique, notamment dans la région du Sahel. Et donc, au niveau de l'Europe, il s'est intéressé, grâce à ce projet Falcon, le but est de favoriser la résilience des populations de faucons cresrelette d'Europe centrale, notamment face au changement climatique. Parce qu'ils se sont rendus compte que, par exemple, les fortes vagues de chaleur impactent la mortalité des jeunes au nid. Et donc, l'idée, c'est notamment de suivre un petit peu, donc déjà de mettre à disposition des faucons, des nichoirs, des box, en fait, pour que les faucons puissent trouver des endroits pour nicher. Aussi, le projet vise à suivre un petit peu la façon dont ils utilisent l'habitat. Donc, les faucons utilisent pour se nourrir, en fait, toute la plaine de Pau en Italie. Et donc, le projet vise à aussi suivre justement à comprendre la façon dont ils se nourrissent et ils utilisent cet habitat-là. Et donc, l'objectif, ce sera à terme d'améliorer la qualité de l'habitat pour le faucon en Europe centrale et aussi de développer un réseau de collaborateurs pour la surveillance des populations. Et enfin, de promouvoir la sensibilisation du public pour cette espèce. Et en parallèle, en fait, du faucon cresserellette, il s'intéresse aussi aux populations de hérons, toujours dans la plaine de Pau. Alors, contrairement aux faucons, les hérons, eux, ils vont utiliser plutôt la partie un peu plus humide. Mais cette partie aussi de plaine humide est menacée par le changement climatique, mais aussi dans la façon dont l'agriculture moderne finalement assèche un peu ces zones humides. Et donc, une partie de la présentation était aussi sur les projets en Afrique, puisque donc, le faucon et les hérons donc, migrent en Afrique. Et un des projets en particulier était au Sénégal. Et alors, je vais retrouver le nom exact. Donc, au Sénégal, c'était près de la rivière le Saloum River. Il y a une île qui s'appelle Kousma. Et donc, ils sont allés avec son équipe sur cette île, notamment pour donc baguer les faucons au niveau de leur site d'hivernage, pour pouvoir aussi étudier les mouvements de ces faucons sur leur zone d'hivernage. Voilà.